Hi everyone, this is video number 3 where I am discussing the handout that's on Blackboard and specifically the headings and organization of your paper. Okay, so you'll have your title at the top and you'll have your name at the top. There's no need for a cover sheet, but if you have one, that's fine. This is a investigative research paper guide. I just forgot to delete the end reflection. You can just cross that out. Okay, you're doing an investigative research paper. You will use headings and subheadings to organize your paper as shown in this example, and I'll discuss those headings. Also, please note that you must be writing an urban geography paper, so it must be geographic in nature and must be about urban places, okay, in your examples, in your context, right? And that's one of the reasons why I require certain journals, like the geography journals, because that keeps you on task, keeping it geographic in nature. A lot of the think tanks and other NGOs that I gave you tend to be urban or geographic, like Urban Land Institute, for example. Okay, so your first heading is going to be introduction. A heading is a section header. There are other names for it. You can use the numbers or omit the numbers, but it has to have some sort of formatting to make it clear that it's a main section heading. Okay, so the first one you're going to have is called introduction. And in your introduction, you're going to give a brief introduction to your topic and your location, your urban places, okay? And so you're going to talk about why this is worth studying in the first place. You're going to provide a broad context to your topic, and that's pretty much in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, you'll include your research questions, and you might have a third paragraph as well. Maybe your research questions go in your third paragraph. You'll have 2 or 3 paragraphs in your introduction, okay? When you state your research questions, please be extremely clear that they are your research questions. For example, you may write, literally, this investigative research paper aims to answer the following 3 questions, : 1, 2, 3, right? And you list your questions. And then you go on to discuss how you might try to answer those questions. Okay, so that's going to be your introduction. Your research questions will seek to resolve an issue or answer complex questions without any preconceptions of the answers. Part D really is for the reflective paper. That doesn't really apply to you. I'm sorry, I forgot to delete that. I'm going to put out a new handout where I've deleted number D. Okay, your next section heading should be called background. Okay, and the background is going to include any sort of background information that the reader needs to understand your topic and your urban places. Okay, so this is the only section where you're not solely aiming to answer your research questions. In every other part of the paper, after the background, your only goal is to answer the research questions. The background, you can kind of vary a little and give some background information that would be useful to know when reading the rest of your paper. Okay, the rest of the paper just aimed at your research questions. Everything else that isn't relevant should not be included. So in your background, you will absolutely have a location map. You will show where your urban places are. You will have a basic location map showing where it is in the state it's in, right? A zoomed out kind of an overview of the location. You might also need to zoom in and show particular neighborhoods on another map. It could be in your introduction. It could also be later in the paper, okay? You will have a basic description of the urban geography of these places that you'll discuss in the paper, and basic information such as maybe demographics of the city, maybe some laws that impact the situation, any historical knowledge. Don't get too crazy with the historical knowledge, because you can write a whole paper on the history, right? So be very selective in what you include. Make sure it really contributes to understanding the place. And I just have a little note about writing. Each paragraph should have one idea that it's discussing. One idea per paragraph. Okay? And it's starting to rain on me, so I'm going to move under the cover here. Okay. Tried to be outside. It's not working so well. All right, so also in this section of the handout, you'll see that I've included some of my writing. And I include that just to show you how to use in-text citations. See how I have Mo Forth and Munt, 1998? That's an author and a date. That is the in-text citation style that I prefer and I want you to use. Use the author and the date. See, I've done this with Harvey, Mo Forth and Munt, Poria, etc. Right? So I do these with a lot of them. Note here, I have two where this fact in the question right before it, or within this question, two different articles stated that fact. That strengthens your paper, that elevates it to the next level, showing that not only did you find one journal article that talked about it and cited that fact, but multiple journal articles found this particular fact out. That strengthens your paper. That elevates it to the next level. That's a good thing, okay? Each paragraph throughout your paper should have 2 or 3 sources within the paragraph, and different sources. If you cite the same source over and over again within the same paragraph, that's a weaker paper. That's not a high-level college paper. And you can't write an entire paragraph and then just put a source at the end of the paragraph. That's more like a book report style, and that's high school level writing. So you need to be integrating sources within your paragraph, citing within the sentences the facts that you've learned from these different sources. Okay? Also note that I used a quote here. You should avoid quotes whenever possible. The only time you should use a quote is if that author, in this case it was David Harvey in 1989, said something so distinct, so special, so unique, that geographers refer to his quote all the time. So it was so special that if I didn't quote it, it wouldn't have been proper. Because people always talk about how David Harvey talked about how the eye is never neutral. And there's a proper way to see, and these sorts of things. So I quoted him. Otherwise, you should be paraphrasing while you still give credit to that source for that fact. Okay? So each paragraph should have 2 or 3 sources minimum. They should be different sources. You should be integrating your sources that you've learned from different journal articles and books and so forth. Okay? So that's the background. Following the background section, you should have additional headings. This is the meat of your paper. It depends on your topic. I can't tell you what these heading titles will be, okay? But you will have, a lot of my students like to have a heading per research question. That could work. So your 3rd heading could be your 1st research question. Your 4th heading could be your 2nd research question. Your 5th heading could be your 3rd research question. You could do that if you want. It depends on your topic. Okay? So when you start a heading must have at least 2 or 3 paragraphs to warrant its own heading. If it only has 1 paragraph, even 2 paragraphs, it's pretty weak. Maybe it shouldn't have its own heading. Okay? And within a heading, you can also use subheadings. So here for number 3, you can see it's bolded. Let's say the heading is gentrification in Columbus, Ohio. I would write 1 or 2 paragraphs to start off that main heading, and then I might use subheadings to just further dive into that topic. So in this case, I might look at the two main populations that are involved in this case in gentrification in Columbus, Ohio. In this case, the African American population and the LGBTQI population. So you see how I have it labeled 3A, 3B, it's indented and underlined. That tells me it's a subheading rather than a main heading. Okay? And each subheading must have at least 2 paragraphs or it doesn't warrant its own subheading. Then after you have your subheadings, you need at least 1 more paragraph to kind of tie together this main heading before you move to the next heading. Okay, so if you use subheadings, make sure you're mindful of this sort of thing. When you're reading journal articles, you'll see that every journal article has headings and subheadings. Follow their lead. Learn from the journal articles you're reading. Okay, the last 2 headings you're going to have are the summary and discussion. The summary is going to recap the main points, the important points that help you succinctly and effectively answer your research questions. So you're going to have 2 or 3 paragraphs in your summary where you very directly answer your research questions with the main points that you've learned through your research. This shouldn't be anything new. It should be recapping what you've already discussed in your paper. Then the discussion is your very last section. Okay, your discussion is the big picture, the broad context, why this is meaningful, what could be done in the future, who cares, why does this topic matter, who does it matter to. You can also include some reflective content, you can include some opinions, you could talk about what should happen in the future. Maybe your research didn't go exactly as planned, so you talk about how to further investigate one of your research questions that it just didn't go as well and it needs further research, right? Things like that. So your discussion, it can be quite long. It can be up to a full page, even in a single spaced paper, okay? So those are your headings. Also on this handout, I have a figure shown with the proper label. So let's say this is your figure, it's figure number 1. You would do this chronological order throughout your paper, figure 1, 2, 3, 4, so forth. And you would have a caption and a source listed on your figure. You can put your figures within the paper or you can put them at the end if you don't want to deal with the formatting in Word. I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. Okay, and then also in this handout I just have some other notes. Writing is an iterative process. If you just try to write a paper and turn it in without going through it and editing it several times, it's not going to be well written. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, make sure you're being logical in your flow of ideas. Do not use the first person or I statements. So don't say I think or I learned or I anything. I know it's from your perspective. You're the author. So instead of saying, let's say in your discussion, you're going to say, I think that this topic is important because, just say, this topic is important because, right? Just eliminate the I part of the statement. Do not use I statements. Your grade will drop dramatically for using I statements. Notice in your journal articles, I statements are not used. Avoid using words and starting sentences with words like they, them, he, she, because, it, right? Elevate your writing. Check your spelling and grammar. Don't use conversational speak. Use a writing voice. So for example, we use the word very in conversation all the time. Don't use it in your paper. Find a higher level, a more sophisticated vocabulary word, or eliminate it completely. What does the word very do for you? Nothing. It barely says anything. Okay? It's very loud. It's just loud. How does very help you in that situation? It doesn't. Okay, I'm running out of time on the video, so I'm just going to end it here. I will finish in the last video going over the rest of this list and going over the other handout.